All right, I'm going to start just with a review of this little slide right here. Most of the animals can be divided into protostomes or deuterostomes. Now, there's a couple that can't. We'll get to those in a minute. The protostomes are the mollusk. What do we say mollusks were? An example of a mollusk. Clams, keep going. Mussels. What did you say? Oysters. Slugs, snails, octopus, squid, those kind of things. Annelids, we've said, are things like what? Segmented worms, like earthworms and leeches. And arthropods are insects, crustaceans like lobsters, things like that. So the protostomes start off during cleavage. Their cleavage happens in a spiral pattern, and it's determinate. That's the key thing to understand, the determinate part. Determinate means once they split, what's already determined about them, what they're going to be. So they really stop being capable of becoming anything. By the time they've done cleavage, what they're going to become is determined. That's what determinate means here. Reminder, what's a coelom? It's a body cavity, space for their organs. And notice the way that theirs forms. It forms by pieces of mesoderm. These solid masses split open in the middle to form it. And then the blastopore, the opening into the gastrula or opening into the blastula, in the protostome means mouth first. So that becomes the mouth. Deuterostomes, there's only two groups of animals that are deuterostomes. Echinoderms, things like what? Starfish and sea urchins, things like that. And chordates, which are what? Vertebrates. All the vertebrates. During cleavage, our cells divide in a radial pattern. And cleavage, at least to begin with, is indeterminate, which means even after they divide, they still have the ability to what? Be anything. They're still stem cells. The coelom forms in a slightly different way. The arc enteron, which is the primitive gut. Here's the blastopore. This cavity in here is going to be the digestive system eventually, but it folds back in here to make the coelom. That's where your body cavity forms from. And then the other thing, the blastopore, the opening into the embryo, actually becomes the anus. And that tube, that arc enteron, will eventually push through and form the mouth on the other side. Form second. What about the things that aren't up here? Like sponges, cnidarians. Why aren't they in there? Yeah, they don't have at least three germ layers, so they don't qualify as protostome or deuterostome. They're not either one. Well, let's go a little further here. We talked about the different kinds of body cavities. A few kinds of animals have no body cavity at all, acoelomate. What would be a kind of animal without a body cavity? Sponge, jellyfish, flatworms, things without what? You don't need a body cavity if you don't have what? Organs. Things without organs in general. Nematodes, which are roundworms, they have a body cavity. It's called a pseudocoelom. It's made in a little bit different way than the normal coelom in protostomes and deuterostomes. It's not made directly from the mesoderm. It's not lined with it. It forms in between two of the germ layers, endo and mesoderm. But most other animals have a coelom, a body cavity, completely lined with cells from the middle germ layer, mesoderm. And this is in all the protostomes and deuterostomes. Annelids, mollusks, arthropods, echinoderms, chordates. Now, we talked about these terms the other day. Metazoans are animals with tissues. Pretty much all animals except sponges. Sponges don't really have tissues. They're called parazoans. And we talked about some terms. Cephalization. What did that mean? Yep, the sensory organs are highly concentrated in the head. Talk about dorsal. Where's the dorsal side of a four-legged animal?
Back.
The top, the actual back where the backbone is at. It's the top of a four-legged animal. Ventral's belly. Anterior is front, head side. Posterior is back or tail side.
Do we have dorsal, ventral, and anterior, posterior?
Normally, this would be ventral, dorsal, anterior, posterior. All right, we talked about one phylum of animals the other day. We talked about sponges a little bit. So just a quick review of those. They're in a phylum called Porifera because they have pores, holes. They're considered to be the most simple animals. They don't have any true tissues or organs. Not really any systems like circulatory systems and such. No body cavity. Don't need it. They're not triploblastic, which means they don't have what? No three germ layers. No gastrula. They filter feed. They filter little things like algae and bacteria out of the water. Feed on those. A lot of them are both sexes in one organism, hermaphroditic. As adults, they're sessile. But when can they move? As larvae. They have a little larvae that look a lot like a protozoan or something. A couple more things we will mention about them. They don't really have a skeleton, but they have either proteins or glass-like particles that help to support them. There's a protein called spongin that's strong and hard, and they have these little glass-like things called spicules that help to support them, or they can also be made out of calcium carbonate. Better known to a lot of people as what? Chalk, or around here, what might it be called? Limestone. Pretty strong stuff. The two main ways they reproduce, one is budding, which just means they use what kind of cell division? Well, mitosis. They make a little bud that breaks off and forms a new sponge. And then in terms of sex, they release sperm into the water, and those find an egg and become a larva. Yeah.
So when we're swimming in the ocean, if we were to open our mouth, that mean we could get sponge sperm in our mouth?
And that's just the beginning. Lobsters reproduce this way. There's all kinds of things. Jellyfish. There's lots of things that reproduce this way. Yeah. All right, there's a picture. Remember, the way it works is that water comes in through the pores into this hollow opening in the middle. And that opening is lined with these cells called collar cells. They've got a little flagella. They're the filters. And once the water's been filtered, it goes out the top. And that top's called the osculum. And we'll hit another group today, probably the second least complicated form of animal, cnidarians. And before we get into this, what are some examples of cnidarians? Coral, sea anemones, jellyfish, those kinds of things. Now, these guys are diploblastic, which means they have like two germ layers, endo and ectoderms. All of them are aquatic. They're all water-dwelling. There are a few kinds that live in freshwater, but most of them are marine. Most of them live in the ocean. Most of them have radial symmetry. What does that mean, radial symmetry? No, that's bilateral. Radial means there's a center point with pieces coming out like the spokes on a wheel.
They're all going to be the same.
Like that. That's radial. Center point with pieces coming out. Think of a jellyfish. That's the way it looks from the bottom, right? It's the way a sea anemone looks from the top. There are some with biradial, but it's usually just radial symmetry. They have oral and aboral. What do you think aboral means? What's ab mean? If you're abnormal, that means what? That means you're not normal. So that means not the mouth. So they have a mouth side and a not the mouth side. Which is another way of saying they pretty much have an anus. No definite head. Don't really have much of a brain. Got some nerves. We'll talk about that in a minute. They come in two basic shapes, two basic forms that they tend to alternate through in their life. A polyp and a medusa. Why is a medusa called a medusa? Yeah, you know, in mythology, Medusa was the woman with the snake hair, right? Sort of, that's the basic shape of the jellyfish, Medusa. A polyp is more the shape of what? Yeah, like what we think of as a sea anemone. Let me find a picture here. Here you can see the life cycle of your typical jellyfish. Medusa, polyp. Now notice a couple of things about this. The polyp tends to reproduce asexually. So it makes a bud that breaks off through mitosis, and that bud grows up to be a medusa. That's swimming around in the water. It releases sperm or eggs into the water. They'll swim around, find each other. So there's another thing you could be drinking. Fertilize each other, form a diploid zygote. That grows up to be a larva that looks a lot like a little protist or something called a planula. Finds a nice rock, cements itself down, goes back into this, and it all starts over again.
Are those polyps microscopic or?
No, you can see them. They're just usually on the bottom. A couple other things we'll mention while we're looking at the picture. Everything in orange in this picture is what's called the gastrovascular cavity. Think about that word for a minute. Gastro means what? Stomach. And vascular means vessels, like blood vessels. So that big cavity acts like their stomach and like their blood vessels, essentially. They don't have blood, but when they eat, there's really only one opening. The mouth is the anus, which is the mouth. So food comes in, it comes into this cavity, it gets digested. They don't have these. And once it gets digested, how do the nutrients get to where they need to go? They move around, and the nutrients just get pumped through this cavity. But notice this cavity goes throughout their body. So it can go down into the tentacles, it can go up in here, it can go up in here, it can go up in here. It goes all around. So this cavity acts like both the digestive system and the way to pump around nutrients and materials. That's why it's called the gastrovascular cavity. Pretty much all cnidarians have tentacles, usually laced with what? Stinging cells. Stinging cells. So that's how they catch their food with their stingers. Let me back up a little bit here. All right. Their skeletons can be different. Some of them have an exoskeleton, some an endoskeleton, internal. It can be made out of a lot of different stuff. Some, it's made of chitin, sort of like what? Insects and fungi. And calcareous, what does that mean?
Calcium.
Calcium, sort of like us. Or it can be protein. We already talked about their gastrovascular cavity, how that it acts sort of like a digestive system and also like a vascular system, like a circulatory system almost. But I want you to know the name for their stinging organelles are called nematocysts. These are the stingers. And you might think of them sort of like a harpoon. It's not just a stinger, The stinger's usually wet.
I think Jack can.
Yeah, but the stinger's usually attached to the jellyfish by a little rope.
Not that like a little barb.
Yeah, it's like a barb with a rope. And now you can pull things in. That's how they catch their food. Now with us, we're so big we just break those off. But typically, that's how they catch their food. And we'll see some pictures in a minute.
Now, do they actually shoot them out, or do they have to like, I guess, land on something to do that?
They shoot out. I mean, they can't shoot out very far, but yeah, they shoot out. Now, obviously, they don't really have a brain, but they do have some nerves spread out through the body with some simple sense organs. Let's not worry so much about the muscles for right now. We already talked about reproduction, how that the polyp tends to reproduce asexually by budding, and that the medusa tends to reproduce sexually. Also remember that after fertilization, you get this larva called the planula, which looks like a paramecium or something. Since they don't have organs, it means they don't have systems either. So no excretory system, no respiratory system. How do they get rid of waste? They get oxygen. Plain old diffusion. Diffusion and osmosis. And since they don't have any organs, they also don't need a coelom, which means they're neither a wet nor a wet. Well, they're not a protostome or a deuterostome. The coelomates, the things with the body cavity, get divided into protostomes and deuterostomes. They're neither one. And there's just some examples. Jellyfish, sea anemones, coral. The hydra, I've got a video I'll probably show you the next one of these morning things. The hydra are freshwater mostly. They look sort of like a miniature version of a sea anemone. Not microscopic, but tiny. And like I said, we'll see those in the video.
We studied those in 7th grade, I think.
Did you have some real ones to look at?
We watched some budding and everything.
Yeah, they're pretty cool to look at. Pretty cool. All right, there's 3 main classes. You know, the way the classification system goes, what's the biggest group in the classification system? You know, there's one bigger than kingdom. Domain, then kingdom, then phylum, which was what we're talking about right now, phylum Cnidaria, and then class. So the phylum Cnidaria is divided into 3 main classes. The hydrozoans, which are things like the hydra, freshwater for the most part, although there are some marine ones too. That's about all you need to know about that for right now. Scyphozoa is probably the class we know the most about. These are like the regular jellyfish. And there are some big ones. Notice what it says here, that there's some types of jellyfish that can be over 2 meters wide. So that's like close to 7 feet. And their tentacles can be 60 to 70 meters long. That's almost a football field.
That's like if you wouldn't find a game so they couldn't be out.
That'd be huge. That would be huge. Most of them are small. And their polyp stage is either they don't have the polyp stage or it's really short in their life cycle. A lot of times it's just really short. Look at that word right there, anthozoa. Antho means flower. So that word literally means flower, animal. And if you look at a sea anemone, you see why they're called that, right? They look like flowers, plants. So these are sea anemones, also the corals. They're pretty much polyps. They are polyps throughout their whole life. They don't have the medusa stage. They're all marine, all ocean dwellers, found all over the world, but most common where? In like tropical places, Caribbean, places like that. I think you can find them anywhere. So those are our three main groups. Hydrozoa, a lot of them are freshwater hydra, jellyfish, sea anemones, and corals. And there's some pictures. And this one, sea anemone, there's a coral. This is called the man of war, Portuguese man of war. And I don't know how well you can tell what's going on here, but the tentacles of that thing have captured a pretty big fish there. And they're pulling it in to eat it. And then there's just a regular
Can
jellyfish.
they eat it all at one time?
No. I think they do mostly extracellular digestion.
Throw it out.
Digest it on the outside and then suck up the juice. All right, we'll talk about one more group a little bit today. These are mollusks. Now, the mollusks are, first of all, again, things like what? Clams and oysters, snails and slugs, octopus and squid. It's a pretty diverse group. Yep, clams and oysters, snails and slugs, octopus and squid. It's a pretty diverse bunch. They're protostomes, which again means their mouth forms first in embryonic development. It means their cleavage is what kind of cleavage? Determinate. Once they divide, the fate of those cells is determined. It's also spiral.
Does that mean they don't have stem cells?
They do, but after the first few divisions, the fate of those cells is determined for them. They lose the ability to become anything very fast. All right, and most of them have bilateral symmetry. Literally, what's bilateral mean? Two sides. It's like us. If you drew an imaginary line down the middle, you have two sides, which should be what? Well, there should be mirror images of each other, right? Should be mirror images. Most of them have a definite head. Now, there's some exceptions to that, like a clam. But most have a definite head. Their ventral body wall. Ventral again means what? Belly side. Their ventral body wall is specialized as what's called the foot. And this is easy to think about like in a slug, right? You ever watch the slug crawl? Crawls on his belly. That belly can, I don't say gyrate. Gyrate might not be the right word. But contract to help it move. But the foot is all about moving. Helps them to move, locomotion. Most of them, the dorsal wall, which would be our back, forms what's called the mantle, which is this covering that encloses things, encloses their organs. And in some of them, it actually becomes the gills or the lungs, or it may secrete the shell, like in a snail, like in a clam, a mussel, a scallop. So the mantle's pretty important. They do have a coelom, a body cavity, but it's mostly just around the heart. It's kind of small. A lot of them have this organ called a radula. And I'm going to show you a picture of this in a minute. What does something like a slug eat? Oh. What does a slug eat normally? Plant stuff. And the way it gets the plant food, and I'm going to come back to this slide in a second, but I want to show you a picture here first. This is its tongue. Tongue-like organ. Looks like a chainsaw blade, right? You guys seen a chainsaw blade? This thing will scrape food, scrape plant matter off, and that's what it'll eat. So its tongue looks almost like a chainsaw. That's called the radula. A couple more things we'll mention about them. They have a pretty complicated digestive system. You Usually they have a mouth and an anus. Their circulatory system is usually open. And this is a big difference between us and them. Vertebrates, like us, have a closed circulatory system. What does that mean about your blood cells? They don't ever come out of the blood vessels. If your red blood cells come out of your blood vessels, you have a problem, right? Nutrients and oxygen stuff diffuse in and out, but the blood cells themselves stay in the blood vessels, closed. Yes.
Hair like that.
Yeah. Like us.
Why is it when you gut one, they're sealed? It's filled with
Well, because you cut him. You cut his blood vessels open. Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Now, these guys have an open system, which basically means they have a heart and a couple of main blood vessels. When the heart pumps, what happens to that blood? It gets shot out and basically bathes the organs. Comes out of the blood vessels and basically bathes them, and then it collects back up and the heart sucks it back in and sprays it out again. So it sucks it in, sprays it out, sucks it in, sprays it out, sucks it in, sprays it out. It's not very efficient. That's why the more advanced animals have a closed system like ours. Ours is way more efficient. But let me show you a picture of that. So here you can see the heart. The blue area is the coelom. And notice the blood vessel just sort of ends right there. Because it's going to collect the blood and spray it out. Recollect it, run it through the gills, spray it out again. Over and over. This is the gill over here. That's the heart. Which one are we talking about?
So the blood vessel that ends sprays the blood out.
It's just the blood vessel. I'm sure it has a specific name, but I don't know what it is. Let's see. In terms of the way they breathe, pretty diverse. A lot of them breathe with gills. Clam, oyster, those kinds of things. Well, some of the ones that live on land will have lungs. And most of them can also supplement breathing through their skin, what we call body surface breathing. That's why their skin has to stay what? Moist, wet, and thin for the most part. They usually have one or two kidneys. What's the job of kidneys? To filter what? The blood, filter out waste, toxins from the blood. Same job that they have in us. The kidneys usually open up into the pericardial cavity. What's pericardial mean? Pericardial, what would that mean? What's peri mean, like in perimeter? Around the heart. The cavity around the heart. So it takes in the blood from there, and then it empties it into a cavity called the mantle cavity. We'll see that one in a minute.
So, what are the other names for the pericardial cavity in the coelom? Since that's basically all they have is
It's part of the coelom. Part of the
It's
coelom.
just like the regular.
Right around the heart. Just around the heart. They have a nervous system, but no real brain. But this word right here is going to show up a lot. Ganglia. What's a ganglia? Well, that's actually plural. There's several of those. Ganglion would be the singular. Anybody know what it is? It's like a mass of nerves. A clump of nerves. So it's sort of a primitive version of it. A brain. It's like a primitive brain, not very complicated, but it's got some nerves. In the middle of the organism, somewhere in the central part, there's a nerve ring, sort of like a brain, but not really. It can't really think very much. They do have some sense organs: touch, smell, taste, equilibrium. Here, equilibrium does. What does equilibrium mean here? in this context. We're talking about it as a sense. Yeah, like balance. Talk about balance. And also vision. Now, I made that statement about him not being very intelligent and not having much of a brain. There's an exception to that. What do most scientists think the most intelligent invertebrate is? Close. An octopus. An octopus has a pretty developed brain. They can be trained to do tricks and stuff. I saw this thing on the Discovery Channel the other day. They had an octopus in a pool of water. And they had a smart octopus and a dumb octopus, pretty much. It was like the AP and the LD octopi, you know. And they were feeding them lobsters. But they fed them the lobsters. They threw the lobsters in like a jar with a screw on top. So the octopus could see the lobster, but it was in a container with a top on it. Well, the smart octopus just screwed it off, pulled it out, ate it. The dumb one, he couldn't figure it out. So eventually they put them in tanks side by side, and they threw in the jar to the smart one, and the dumb one watched. And the smart one taught him how to do it. And he opened it up and took him out. Didn't take long. And so they can learn. They can be trained to do things. Three main classes in this group. Gastropods. What does the word gastropod mean? Well, it's kind of up there, isn't it? Stomach, foot. These are things that crawl around on their ventral side. These would be things like snails and slugs and stuff. Gastropods. There are some other examples, but if you know snails and slugs, you're okay on this. And notice what it says here, the most numerous and diverse of all the mollusks. It's about 40,000 living species of them. 40,000 different kinds, and a lot of fossil species too. They're usually sluggish. Imagine that, slugs. What's sedentary mean?
Chill.
Yeah, they're couch potatoes. Not literally, but they don't move a whole lot. A lot of them have heavy shells, makes it hard to move. And that's about all we'll say about them for right now. The next class, bivalvia, the bivalves. It means two valves, but really we're talking about two what? We're talking about a clam, we're talking about two what? Two shells, two-part shells. Two-part shells is really what we're talking about. So these are things like your mussels, like you'd see down in the Flint River, your clams, your scallops, your oysters, and even these little things called shipworms. Most of them are sedentary filter feeders. So they pull in water, filter out algae, bacteria, eat that, and then shoot the water back out.
In one hole.
Two holes. They got an in and an out. And the way they produce the current, the way they pull the water in and push it back out, is they actually use their gills as a filter. Their gills are like mucus coated, and they're close to the mouth. So not only do they get oxygen, they also catch food in this mucus. But their gills have a cilia on them, so they're beating all the time, and that's causing water to be pulled in through one hole and pushed out through the other. Now notice here, they have no head. Think about a clam, there's no head in there. No radula, because they don't need to scrape plants, they're just filtering stuff. And very little cephalization, because there's no head. It's that little chainsaw looking tongue that helps scrape food. And then the last group, the cephalopods, that means head foot. These are things like squid and octopi. The most complicated, complex mollusks there are. They're all marine. They're all active predators. I watched the thing the other day, another Discovery Show thing. There were these divers chasing around an octopus. And every time it moved, what did it do? Like it would hop from like a rock to another rock to another rock, hiding from these divers. What would it do when it would change colors? It would like go camouflage. It would change its color so it would match its background. Yeah.
Like squid octopuses? I mean, not squid,
chameleon? Yeah. Sort of like a chameleon. A lot of them can change their colors. They can pump pigments to the skin or move them away from the skin, essentially. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but they can change the pigments.
You said pigments aren't colored. You said they're proteins.
Pigments are proteins that absorb certain colors and reflect other colors. The way they move mostly is they have this structure that sucks in water and then they spray it out. It's like a jet propulsion, basically. They move by sucking in water and spraying it out like a water gun. Now, these are things like squids and octopi. What's a nautilus? Looks like a squid in a shell.
Wasn't that the name of the submarine and the
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Yep. But it sort of looks like a squid in a shell. Here's a clam looking inside. You can see these are the gills. Like I said, these would be coated with mucus. And it's hard to tell here, but this in-current siphon, that would be the in hole. Notice that in hole runs over the gills where the food gets filtered out. And then here's the out hole. And remember, these are all covered with cilia that are beating to push water in and then push it back out the other side. Here's the heart. And notice again, the blood vessel just sort of ends right there. It's got what kind of circulatory system? Open. Notice there's lots of organs in there. Here's the stomach, the intestines. These two things right here. What do you think those are? Well, it kind of tells you here. They're muscles. Muscles to open and close the shell. There's only two main muscles. What's maybe the biggest predators of these guys? Probably not. Well, other than people. Probably starfish. Starfish is made to beat these things because the starfish will start to pull on that shell and try to open it. Well, before that, starfish will get tired, so it'll rotate around and use different legs. And it just keeps rotating around. What eventually happens to those two muscles? They get tired, shell opens, starfish shoots its stomach in, dumps all these enzymes and acids in there, and then digests it outside of the body, and then sucks it in. Extracellular digestion. That'd be kind of gross. And then notice down here, this is the foot. A clam will stick that out. It's like a hatchet-shaped muscle, and it'll push itself around, help it to move. But that's its foot. And I don't think we're going to try to start flatworms today, so we're going to stop there. Spoon. Sorry. What happened to my sign-in? There it is. Everybody get on the list? Everybody on? I assume so. All right, this is for you guys, these people. We are doing a bunch of different things today. We're doing some meiosis, we're doing some math today.
Math. For what? I will get you one of these days, don't